lost my menstrual cycle. My bone density was shit, which is why they kept breaking. Recovery was really not a priority for me. And then went on and had an opportunity to work for a family privately as their dietitian and chef.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Cheeky Midweeky, where we are making strength and conditioning not boring anymore, and we do that by highlighting the practitioners in the field. We don't only have strength coaches on, and this episode is one of those. We have a registered dietitian, Ellen Davis, on the show. Ellen, thank you for coming on. I greatly appreciate you taking time out of your day to share with our community.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be having this conversation this morning.
The fact, this is how small the world is. You know Ryan Martin, and Ryan reached out and was like, dude, Ellen's awesome. She helped me out a ton. That's just how small this world is, but that's how strength coach and their dietitian, nutritionist, whatever person you have on the staff, that's how it's supposed to be.
Yes, I totally agree. And it's so funny. Your connection to Ryan. So Ryan and I go back quite a long ways from my days in a previous role as a sports dietitian. But yeah, I was able to support them when he was at Drake. And it's so true, right? Like we were talking about before we came on. The benefit of what we do is that we can support one another. And I think, none of us can do it on our own, right? Like we all have our unique experiences and areas of expertise. And so once we come together and truly collaborate as a collective, that's how we honestly change athletes' lives now and into the future, which I'm super passionate about.
Amen. And I know strength coaches feel this way, that sport coaches think that sport coaches can be a strength coach because they like to work out. They also, most of the time, I think y'all have it harder because everybody eats. That was one of our nutritionists came on. They're like, everybody eats, so they think that they're a nutritionist.
It is so true. Everybody eats, and everybody's neighbor eats, and everybody's mom eats, right? And everybody's found something that works, great for them, and so it's assumed to be the end-all, be-all, best-case approach. But the other part of that story is that everyone's energy needs, nutrition needs, are extremely unique and individualized. So it's just sometimes hard to convince people of that, remind them of that.
So what would you say, we have listeners, our biggest population are coaches that work in college as an assistant. We also have coaches that work in the private sector, high school, professional, and tactical. What is kind of your biggest golden nuggets that you want strength coaches to understand about how to help people in your role, but also not cross over? Because we have to play in the sandbox together, but we have to respect our limitations.
Sure. I think the most important thing is that we're on the same team, right? And we recognize that we're not trying to fight for space. Like you said, we're playing together in the sandbox. If our goal at the end of the day is to support our athletes' performance, recovery, and injury prevention, that is going to require support from multiple facets, right? From strength, from nutrition, from mental performance, from athletic training, from their head sport coach, right? We all play a role. And I think for me, from a nutrition standpoint, what's been really successful with the organizations and coaches and teams that I work with is if we can define that common language around food and nutrition, we are years ahead of our competitors, right? And so it's really recognizing that, and I think we're all here, right? We recognize that food is fuel. We know that. I think it's important for us to recognize that food is more than fuel, right? Food is fun, food is celebration, food is, related to religion. There's just so much that food is also a part of outside of your life as an athlete. And I think for me right now, that's something that I'm really, I don't know. I just feel like I've been having a lot of conversations about that recently. But I think if we can define a common language about what food does for us and enhance that consistency, right? In that messaging, because for you as a strength coach, you're going to see the athletes way more consistently than I'm going to see the athletes, right? And so I lean on you for support to maintain that positive language around food. And there's no food shaming that is necessary, right? We don't need to, demonize any certain types of foods, but we do need to support a positive relationship with that food and how it relates to
And
performance.
so what I wrote here is I wanted to double down on the food is cultural, because one of my colleagues at Towson, he talked about that, where the person he was working with didn't understand that. Like, they really just didn't get it, and they were trying to get his basketball players to, eat quinoa and tabbouleh, and he's like, that's just not going to happen. Like, that's
Mhm.
not my population. We have to introduce it slowly. If there's other strength coaches out there that are having that, or how can we then recognize that issue, whatever, and then be able to advise for the better?
Yeah, such a good question. I mean, and this is something that has evolved in my professional life, right? Like as a baby dietitian coming out of college, I came in hot. Was like, we're gonna eat all of the most nourishing foods, and like, we don't got time for the crap. And then 14 years later, it's like, nah, I'm gonna meet you where you're at, because that is so much more successful, right? Like I was getting frustrated because I felt like I was a crappy dietitian because I couldn't elicit that behavior change. But I had to stop and recognize, like, no, it's because you're doing something that they have no interest in doing, right? Like, meet them where they are at. Ask them, ask for feedback, have conversation, approach those conversations with curiosity, right? Like, and find a way to make it fun. That's been something that has been so instrumental in my kind of most recent successful conversations with athletes and teams and organizations. Like, food has to be fun, right? Because it provides us with so much more than just the fuel, right? It's really your gateway to a conversation with some of those athletes who have no interest in pursuing nutrition for their performance recovery and injury prevention. It's, like you said before, we can lean into the everybody eats, right? Everybody, like, has to eat in order to sustain that high performance output. And so if we can use that as kind of a catalyst for change, I think we can be really successful. But to answer your question, right, meet them where they're at, get curious, incorporate foods that they like, and then like I like to say, right, eat what you want, add what you need, right?
Ooh,
Eat what you want, add what you need. And I think from a
that's
coach's
good.
perspective, I think you can really double down on that, and provide them with what they want, and then you get to add what they need, right? And you get to have your cake and eat it too.
That's really good. Like, because I mean, to me, the thing that I keep harping on and thinking about as you were just talking there is the meeting them where they are at, because that's something that I always struggle with. Because if I know I have something that can help you, like, I just want to tell you, and I just like the
Yes.
same thing like you, like,
Yes.
I know I've been working in strength conditioning for 14 years, but it's like, I still feel like that newbie coach. Like, I'm telling you, I got this, like, this can help you. Like, just do it. Like, I'm here to help. Like, how were you able
Yes.
to shift that mindset?
Oh, such a good question. And I am like you, right? Like, it's like I have all of this experience, and like I'll say wisdom. Again, I'm gonna say I'm never gonna claim to be the smartest person in the room. It's just never gonna be true. But like, I know food, and I do know what it can do for athletes. And so I've found the most success in starting small, right? With those athletes who are the most resistant. You start small, and then you really get them to dig into that reflective process and have them begin to understand, okay, what is this doing for me? How is it affecting how I am performing? How does it affect how am I feeling when I wake up in the morning? How is my sleep? How is my digestion? How are my relationships with others, right? Like, start to ask them those other questions, and then draw it back to, okay, well, how do you think nutrition may have impacted that change, right? And then the hard part about nutrition is everyone wants a quick fix, right? Like, everyone wants, just like, give me a meal plan. I shouldn't say everyone, because we're just talking about
Yes.
people
Yeah.
who
Yeah. Yeah.
who are
Yep.
resistant to nutrition, but the people who are ready for it are like, okay, all right, I'm in, like, let's go. It's like, okay, I love your enthusiasm, like, that's awesome. Let's bottle that up and, like, leak it out over time. But the thing about nutrition is that it takes time, just like it takes time to develop in the weight room, right? Like you're going to see an impact quickly, but like I say to my athletes, like, okay, I'll take a soccer player as an example, right? The first day that you showed up to the pitch, were you the best you have ever been? Like, were you amazing? No. Like, what do you have to do in order to get better, to get as good as you have gotten, right? Like, you have to show up, you have to practice, you have to do it. It's the same thing with nutrition, right? You have to do it consistently. It's not going to be an overnight success story. And that's tough for people because you have to keep putting in the work.
That reminds me a lot of what Pratik Patel talked about on his episode was athletes don't instantly be like, oh, you gave me this meal plan and now look at how much better I feel. And it's
Mm-hmm.
harder to get buy-in. So anybody that's been listening to us for the last 10 plus minutes, they might be wondering like, well, why in the heck did you get into this field? Like, why fight this fight that you're fighting? Because it sounds like it's difficult.
Oh, it is. That is 100% true. It is hard, and it's funny because I've been having that conversation kind of consistently at my house with my husband recently. But and then I ask myself, like I wake up with that same passion every single day to help, to be a helper. But you asked how I got into this field, and so let's dive into that a little bit. So as a high school athlete, I ran track and cross country. I played basketball. I played softball. I was on the dance team. I went to a small school in Northeast Iowa and had the great opportunity to do it all because we could, and it was a long time ago, right? There was no specialization in a little 1A school. We were good at a lot of stuff, which was a lot of fun. I recognized probably about my sophomore year that running would probably be in my future. And I wouldn't say that I doubled down on, but I was putting forth a commitment that not a lot of others were at the time, right? Like now that would just be standard, but like 20 years ago, it was not the norm. And earned an opportunity to go on to the University of Missouri to run track and cross country there. And I had a lot of success in high school. Like again, I was just making decisions that no one else was at the time, and I was uber competitive. I was telling my 6-year-old last night, we went to the Drake relays, and we were talking about like when mom ran at the blue oval and whatever, and he's had conversations with me. He's like, so you never lost at the state track meet? And I was like, no, I never lost. He's like, how did you do that? And I told him, I was like, dude, I just really hated to lose. Like I was super competitive, and like his wheels were just turning. But anyway, that's besides the point. Had a lot of success in high school, and then went on to the University of Missouri, and I struggled immensely from a performance, recovery, and injury standpoint. I had 5 stress fractures in a 3-year time period in the first 3 years,
Wow.
and it was tough. Mentally, it was tough. Physically, it was tough. I was just beating myself up thinking like, what changed? Like, I'm not any less passionate about this. I'm not any less committed, right? Like, of course, like I was having fun as a college athlete, but I was not I was not trying to skirt my responsibilities is what I'm trying to say. And it was frustrating. I was like, dang it, I feel like the harder I try, the worse it gets. And, we started to kind of put some pieces of the puzzle together. And at the time, like I said, it was a long time ago. We didn't have a sports dietitian on staff at the time. Jana Heitmeyer was coming up. She was starting her education to become a dietitian, but she was in the weight room at the time. Amazing human being, love her. But we just didn't have it yet, right? Like we were dabbling in nutrition, but didn't have that like level of expertise just quite yet. And so I started to explore on my own. And I was like, okay, well, I also need to figure out what I'm going to do with my life. And this seems to be like, like something that I could be passionate about for a long time. And found the dietetic program at the University of Missouri and really never looked back. I knew when I began that journey that sports would be my ultimate goal, right? Like I knew I needed to become a dietitian first, and then I would go on and specialize in sports dietetics. And There weren't, again, there weren't a lot of others doing that at the time, and the curriculum was certainly not designed to like specialize in sports, but that's okay. I mean, like we were talking about before, you got to be a lifelong learner. You got to figure it out. And so, started putting this all together, and you know, pieced together a couple of good, decent years at the end of my college career, and just recognize that nutrition played such a huge role, right? Like looking back, it wasn't necessarily that I was, I wasn't intentionally doing it incorrectly. I wasn't intentionally under fueling. However, I was experiencing what we now know as relative energy deficiency in sport, or REDS. I had lost my menstrual cycle. My bone density was shit, which is why they kept breaking. Recovery was really not a priority for me. I was, essentially skipping meals because I didn't have time to eat, and I just really wasn't prioritizing it as a component of my training. And so anyway, figured that all out as I learned, and knew that I wanted to become a sports dietitian to help developing athletes avoid making the same mistakes that I made, right? Because no one deserves that. No one deserves that heartache and just that extreme frustration. And unfortunately, I see it still today. Like there's a lot of burnout that happens early on, or through that transition from high school to college, and it's not necessary. And so I'm on a mission to help help athletes avoid doing that.
Well, it's also I said this at Towson, where it's not fair for one nutritionist, dietitian, whoever is hired at the school for 550 plus
Yeah,
athletes. I'm like, that's just not, that's
you're
literally
right.
worse than actually having somebody, in my opinion.
You're absolutely right, and that is such a astute reflection on your part, because it's hard, and I'll say I never had the opportunity to serve as a collegiate sports dietitian, just because the way living in Iowa, I came back to Iowa after I graduated from Mizzou, and there weren't positions available at the time, and I also didn't have the experience, even if there would have been. And so I kind of missed that whole boat, but have kind of formed my career as a sports dietitian in a different way, which we can talk about later if you want to. But you're so right, right? Like these sports dietitians who are part of a performance team, at a collegiate or professional setting, that are responsible for it on their own. It's so tough, and I feel for them and their athletes, because yeah, we all want to help, right? Like we want to do our best, but like there's only so many hours in a day, so it can be really, really challenging.
Well, what I'll say too is the fact that, all right, strength coaches, we came in our field, we were after athletic trainers essentially. And I feel like most sport coaches might have been reluctant to let go of the reins of the training, but it's like, no, we're the expert. Let us do it. Well, now strength coaches, for the most part, and like I know of some in this state that are like, no, I don't want to let go of the nutrition. It's like, you're doing the same thing that you got mad at the sport coach about not doing. Like, let the nutritionist do their thing. Like, one of my, I wouldn't call him a friend, but his wife works at a university, and like I had a conversation with her. She's super smart, but like, to know that the certain head strength coaches aren't letting her work with them, I was like, this is mind boggling. And like the fact like that this is reality is archaic, because it's 8 years, 10 years old. Like, play in the sandbox together, man, because you can build a bigger castle when everybody's working together.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, and kind of my thought with that is, honestly, my thought about that became more clear after I had kids, right? Because you always hear other parents say, I don't, they won't listen to me, but they'll listen to someone else who is saying the same thing as I am saying. And I am like, and I started to hear that a lot as a sports dietitian, when I had an opportunity to go in and work with teams and coaches and such. They're like, I don't know why they'll listen to you. Like, they won't listen to me. And I say, with all the respect in the world, right? Like, one, a lot of experience and a lot of knowledge, like, right? Like, please respect that. But two, right? Like, they can't hear the same thing from one person and do it all, right? Like, and now I see my kids do that, right? Like, as soon as they hear a different voice, they have more buy-in, right? Because you have the different experience, you can look at it through a different lens, right? And like, you aren't, as a sports dietitian, I am not there making decisions about their playing time, right? Like,
Mm.
that has nothing to do with me, right? I mean, I support their playing time, but it hits different when it's coming from someone else, is what I have found. And I know that's not necessarily the case everywhere, but I have found success with that, when working with parents, with working with coaches, with working when in working with other healthcare professionals, right? Like, and treatment, when working on a interdisciplinary team on the case, like an eating disorder case, as an example, right?
Mm.
Like, we all are saying the same thing in a different way, right? And we're all communicating with one another in order to, ultimately support the success and longevity of that athlete, right? So, different topic, but same concepts, right? So, we know, I mean, this is evidence based, this is research backed. Like, the sooner that you can get, um, treatment started with, a multi-person team, the more successful the outcomes in that particular case.
So what I just wrote down there was, when should us strength and conditioning coaches bring in the expert? Like, when is, okay, an athlete's kind of talking to us about food and they need an issue, and it's, same thing almost like with an athlete's like talking to us about something that's like, hey, you've crossed the line now. Like, you're now entered disordered eating, or whatever the proper terminology is. When do we bring you in, and what should that process kind of look like? And like you said, okay, you didn't work in college sports, but from a high level, whether it's high school, college, pro, what should that look like in your ideal world?
Yeah, that's a good question. So if an athlete presents with disordered eating or eating disorder, which a strength coach wouldn't diagnose, of course, but like, if you have concern, right? In my opinion, and I think a lot of people would share the same opinion, you take action immediately, right? Because here's the thing, so if you have an athletic trainer on staff, which almost everyone is going to do, you're gonna point that individual to the athletic training staff, right? If you have a dietitian on staff, you're gonna point that person to the dietitian first, okay? But if you don't have a dietitian, you're gonna take that case to the athletic trainer, and you're gonna let the athletic trainer follow your eating disorder protocol and get the right people, involved, right? The sooner the better, because again, we know that if an athlete is experiencing, disordered eating behaviors, that can quickly evolve into diagnosable eating disorder, which would be diagnosed by a healthcare professional, mental health counselor, or so on and so forth. We know that the sooner we can get them help, the better their outcomes, that follow. And so, as soon as possible is the answer to that question. And I totally realize that not every organization has the luxury of having that entire treatment team, and that total performance team, but that is part of what we do and what we're trying to, um, educate, coaches, trainers, athletic directors on, is the importance of having that referral network, right? Like, you need to know what to do. You need to know what your policies and procedures entail, so that if or when a case presents, you know exactly how to take action.
How important are our words in terms of like, oh, you can eat that, or oh, that's fine? Like, I feel like I probably made that mistake earlier in my career, trying well hearted, but not understanding how important, and the things that we say are like, I don't know if that's even a question, but like, how can you help guide us strength coaches?
Yeah, it's such a good question. And you know what? I appreciate that vulnerability, and I'll step into that box with you, right? Again, as a baby dietitian, I said some things, had some conversations that I make me just cringe at this point in my career, right? And part of that is your lived experience, right? Like, you learn, you grow, you evolve, but I will just again come back and echo, like, just really appreciate that, your ability to reflect and recognize, like, okay, I think we can do better, right? And we all can. And it gets tough, right? It's like, okay, at the end of the day, you want to believe that, like, saying something is better than saying nothing when an athlete needs support, right? But you're right, words do matter. And I think the most I don't know if this is helpful, most valuable piece of information I'd say is just getting vulnerable with your athlete and just saying like, hey, thank you for coming to me with that, right? Like, thank you for opening up. I really appreciate you sharing that. Like, I am here for you. Let's get you help, right? Because those are the most powerful words that you can share with that athlete who has probably been, in a case where disordered eating may be apparent. It's taken a lot of courage for them to even say
Mm,
anything. And so just by validating their courage, that's the first step, right? You don't have to feel like you have to fix it. And I think that's the biggest message that I want strength coaches to know, right? Like, because I think sometimes we avoid the conversation because we don't know what to do with the information. You don't have to be the one and only to quote fix it, right? That's why being a part of a team is so, so important.
You need CEUs to remain certified. At Strength Coach Network, both of our long form education courses, Fundamentals 1 and Fundamentals 2, both have 2.0 CEUs to the NSCA in Category C. When you complete the learning and you complete the learning check, you will earn your 2.0 CEUs. That is 33% of the CEUs you need in a 3-year reporting period. Click the link down below to learn more about both courses.
if you're looking to train your athletes in person or remote, you need to make sure that you're utilizing TeamBuildr. I have had TeamBuildr since 2019 and still utilize it with my remote athletes. This makes everything simple, from the ability to program, have videos right there, wellness questionnaires. Loved being able to have it in person at the rack at Towson, and being able to have it in person now at Goldfinch. This has made my life easier as a coach. If you're still printing on paper, I don't know what you're doing. If you have a different software company, again, I don't know what you're doing. Check out TeamBuildr down in the link below. Are you expanding and need more equipment inside your current room? Or are you building a new weight room and you need to get some equipment? You need to look no further than Powerlift. I had Powerlift equipment when I was at Harvard, Iowa, and at the University of Maryland. I'm currently utilizing their stuff right now. I'm telling you, Powerlift strong, Powerlift made here in America, here in the great state of Iowa, made, manufactured. You have the ability for customization, whether it's on the bench, whether it's on the upholstery, whether it's on the bumpers, across the rack. There are countless options, making sure it's designed to your specific brand. It's Powerlift made, it's Powerlift strong, it's not cheap like all the other competitors, and the people inside of Powerlift are people that you want to be with. Check them out in the link down below. yeah, that the reason I kept nodding my head along is because you're right. Like the vulnerability, that is, I think any listeners out there, like, just understand what like, you heard the information, and we do, strength coaches, we want to solve. Hey, we can help. We
Hmm. Hmm.
that. Look at all the things we can do, but it's like, sit for a moment and reflect with that person, like how long they probably were like, should I tell my coaches? Should I say this? Like, no, like that kind of hit me like a ton of bricks hearing you say that, and so I hope the same thing happens for our listeners out there with that.
Me too.
Um,
Me too. And yeah, it's just realize, I guess with and kind of how we came to this conversation, right? You learned about the summit that we're hosting
yep.
in June, June 13th in Ankeny. And I think the most like the thing that I'm the most excited about with that event is just to empower coaches like yourself to better understand, first of all, like, what to look for, right? Like, what are the warning signs, but then and kind of absorb that knowledge, and please believe, right? I understand this is heavy, this is sometimes overwhelming topic that, like, a lot of us don't want to touch with a 10-foot pole. And I get that. I totally get that. But like you and I both have said multiple times in this conversation, and from both of our professions, we want to help. We were put on this earth to help others, right? And whatever facet that looks like. And so I'm most excited about providing participants with those tools to be a helper, right? Like, you don't have to be the expert, you don't have to fix it, but you do need to equip yourself with the tools to feel more empowered to be that trusted coach, friend, supporter.
Amen to that. I do believe that that's what God put me on this earth to do, is be a strength coach. And that's my mission, to help athletes of all. And that's kind of, I mean, that's why we exist here at Strength Coach Network, where strength coaches come to learn. We bridge the gap from what happens in the weight room to what gets taught in college, because 90% of the time when you're in college and you even get a master's, you haven't even actually programmed for an athlete, which is just crazy to think about. And so we're bridging that gap, because to your point earlier, in strength and conditioning, you might not actually have a concentrated track in strength and conditioning. Like my health and human performance PhD, like a lot of it was health, not as much on the human performance side. So like these specific tracks, and that's why Strength Coach Network exists, because we can educate people on high school, college, pro, tactical, private. Those are all even individualized tracks. Is that what you're all doing with the Performance Collective? Like, hey, you went and you just kind of learned about nutrition and dietetics, but this is a specific track for sport nutrition. Like, talk about the Performance Collective and where your mind was as the founder of that.
Yeah, such a good question. So my career has taken, some twists and turns, right? So graduated in 2010 from the University of Missouri, came back to Iowa, and started my professional career as a dietitian for Hy-Vee, and was a really fun experience, and tried every which way to kind of like weave myself into the sports world, and helping local athletes. And fortunately I had the support from my director at the time that was cool with that. And then went on and had an opportunity to work for a family privately as their dietitian and chef. And I did that for about 3 years, and that was super interesting. It was a family of former and current Division I professional athletes, so really had an opportunity to kind of like sink my teeth into the sports world, which was fun. And that's where I was able to acquire the required hours to sit for the CSSD exam, or the sports dietitian exam. So did that, and then actually went back to Hy-Vee after the opportunity with the family. It just came to a mutual like end, right? Like family dynamics were changing. I was about to start a family, and I knew that type of a schedule was probably not going to be conducive, right? I was traveling all over with them, like just doing a lot of different things. So anyway, went back to Hy-Vee and really launched the kind of the performance nutrition effort, I guess, around central Iowa, working with high schools and colleges in this area, and had a lot of fun. And then had had a little bit of a quarter life crisis, I call it, right? I had 2 babies, and I was totally overwhelmed. I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I can do this. Like I just, it was silly. So I took a job that had nothing to do with sports, because I was like, you know what, I need to challenge myself. Like I need to step outside of what has been comfortable to me, and I need to see if I can live without sports. Well, I lasted about 2 weeks until I realized, like, oh my gosh, this is not for me, right? Like I was born to do this. Like what was I thinking? And the people, like the job was great. The people were awesome. It was just not what I was meant to do. And so was super fortunate I had continued to see athletes in some capacity on the side, and so decided to take the leap of faith, truly, back into full-time private practice. And that is then when I launched the Performance Collective. And so it was truly a 14-year like build up of experience and such. But yeah, just recognize that working with athletes was what I really wanted to do. But I knew that nutrition was not the only thing, right? Like I knew that there's more to becoming a great athlete and human being than just what you eat, right? And that's where the nutrition component, or the Performance Collective, came in. And so the Performance Collective is a team of sports dietitians supporting athletes in all complexities of training, right? Nutrition, recovery, injury prevention. We really, we love to collaborate with our sports physicians, our sports psychologists, mental performance specialists, strength coaches, head coaches, physical therapists, like the whole gamut, like, right? And like, I think what we do as dietitians, like, I think we're just always subconsciously doing that, but like, I wanted the Performance Collective brand, to be just outwardly open with that. Like, again, I never claim to be the smartest person in the room, right? Like, I rely on the people I collaborate with to move the needle. And so that's what the Performance Collective truly means to do, right? We support individuals, we support teams, and we support organizations, athletic departments, club teams, so on and so forth, with nutrition education and practical strategies to make nutrition as fun and as easy as possible.
Anybody listening to this in the Iowa area, central Iowa, I specifically remember, I don't remember the year, but I remember I went back because I was working at Towson and my wife's family is from Iowa, which is part of the reason why we wanted to settle back here. We were home for some summer trip, maybe it was a winter trip, and I went to visit Ryan because I wanted to like actually lift instead of being at like a YMCA where you can't really train. And I wanted to see his setup, and he was kind of walking me around. And I remember him being like, "Yeah, like, in this nutrition thing is growing because I got this Connect at Hy-Vee that's like helping me, and like it's going really well." And I remember being like, "Dude, that's awesome." So like, there's an anecdotal firsthand experience, or technically secondhand, because Ryan told me about it. But I mean, that's the power of what you had vision and been able to do. So kudos to you for that.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that. It's been it's been a fun ride, right? Like, you asked me how I got into this, and like why I keep fighting the good fight, and it's for because of stories like that, because I've in my heart of hearts, I truly believe that um we've impacted lives and generations, right? Like, I've been doing this a while, right? And like, it's evolved, and it's come to be more than what I thought it would have been, 17 years ago when I started my career, or started my education as a dietitian. But I love getting the emails, or the social media shout outs or whatever from my former athletes that will say, like, I am so grateful for the work that we did from a nutrition standpoint, because not only did it help my life as an athlete, right? It's also supporting my life post collegiately, or post high school, if they didn't decide to go on and compete in college athletics. And that's what lights me up. That's what keeps me going, because I know that there are athletes out there that need this, will benefit from this. And it just it's more important to me that I support their longevity, honestly, than their performance right here, right now.
And hearing you talk about that and the Hy-Vee role, and how, kudos to Ryan too for not taking no for an answer and just finding a
Yep.
way. And another
Hmm.
example that I think of is Matt Barber, who's at Albany right now. He was telling me, because Albany and Towson, we were in the same conference, and Matt and I both were at Iowa together and the University of Maryland. He's telling me how he utilized the nutritionist that worked on campus, because all campuses have to have one. And he's like,
Hmm.
listen, she actually was excited because now she has some work to do, like actual real fun things. And he goes,
Hmm.
brother man, he's like, I tapped into a resource that nobody else was utilizing. He's like,
Yep.
now I had a nutritionist just for football. So anybody
Yep.
listening to that, like, there you go.
Hmm. Yeah, it's so true. Like, there is no playbook for us to follow here, like with what I am doing, right? Because no one else has done it yet. And you're so right. And it's been so fun to find those like-minded coaches and athletic directors who are just as passionate about this as I am. And it's been fun to see their success by implementing nutrition. And they quite honestly have a little bit of a leg up right now, and it's fun, and then that's the competitive side of me coming out again. And I tell them that, I'm like, man, I still like to win. It just looks different, right? Like, and we're going to support, wins on and off the field. It's not just about that. We're supporting, successful adventures. But I mean, a dub is cool too.
Amen to that. And speaking to the dubs, like, how much of your information, especially with youth and anybody that may be working with high school kids, or you're in the private sector, how much of your education time goes into the parents versus the kids? Because if mom and dad are the ones bringing the food in the house, like, you can educate the kid all you want, but you gotta get to the root cause, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's been another shift that I've made in the last, 6 to 8 years is I really started to recognize that it's fun to talk to the kids, the high school athletes, but we weren't really seeing a whole lot of impact. And so that's when I started kind of changing the model a little bit. And now the support that I provide to any teams or organizations is multifaceted, right? So we're supporting student athletes, we're supporting parents, and we're supporting the coaching staffs, because everyone's got to hear the same information, right? Going back to that common language, that common defined language, because it starts with the coaches, right? Like that's our entry point. But then parents have to be on board too. And I think, it's been really interesting, and provided a good challenge and opportunity for me to have those conversations with parents sometimes, because kind of going back to what we said at the very very beginning of this conversation, everybody eats, everybody thinks that they're a nutrition expert, and oftentimes, and I love all of my parents, I love them with all my heart, but right, they don't recognize that their needs as a middle-aged, rock star, we'll call them, are different than their developing high school athletes' nutrition needs, right? We have to recognize that adolescent athletes are growing, they're developing, their energy needs, aka calories, are different than that of their parent or caregiver. And that can sometimes be tough for a parent to hear and really kind of internalize. So we have that conversation. I feel like you have a thought.
No, I'm
Okay.
listening. Like I'm listening and 100% like agreeing with you. That's why I'm sitting back, just like, yeah, no, she's 100%
Yeah.
correct.
Yeah, and so so right now with the the different levels of support that we provide, I would say still the majority of our investment of time and resources is meant to optimize that environment for the student athlete, right? So we're creating like on campus small fueling stations for the high school athlete, right? Like literally getting food in their hands to ensure that they have better opportunities to meet their energy needs throughout the day, right? Like that is awesome. We're meeting on campus with athletes. We're providing those opportunities for athletes to meet one-on-one with us, a team of sports dietitians, which has been freaking amazing. That's been just really really instrumental. And but then we're meeting with parents on for sure a monthly basis, if not more, right? And they have access to us all the time, and we're providing them with support, like how to talk to your athletes about food, how to enhance that interest in some more nutrient dense options, right? Eat what you want, add what you need, right? Like how can we make this feasible, practical, right? Because parents are busy. Like I get that as a parent myself. Like we cannot make this complicated. And I always tell them, right? It's never my goal to like add one more thing to your plate, no pun intended, but
There should have
I
been a pun intended. Come on, that was perfect.
um but yeah, it's important for me to make it as realistic as possible. And then for coaches, right, like we're in touch with our coaches on a pretty regular basis, dependent upon the season and kind of where they're at and what their capacity is. We're providing support for training day fueling needs, competition day fueling needs, right? But like let's take again, because it's spring and we're in the middle of soccer season, right? Soccer coach has to be okay with us incorporating halftime fuel, right? Like we've got to be able to make time for that. We've got to prioritize, mom or dad bringing the cooler in, and kids like, hey, grab your food, grab your drink, whatever you need, whatever your specific needs are. That's got to be supported from the coach's standpoint. So it's a delicate dance that we've gotten pretty good at.
No, that's that's really good. And speaking of delicate dance, this might be a trigger question for you. I don't know, but how do you handle the next Netflix series or the next question where parents like, well, I saw this, and so like now my child's meat only or plant only, or that like this might have unpacked a can of worms, and I'm here for it if I did.
Yes, how much time do you have?
As long as you need.
No, this is something that we
Looking to expand your education further, but you don't want to pay the massive fees of going back to school? At Strength Coach Network, we have 2 long form education courses that both cost less than one course taught to you by an online school. If you click down below to learn more about Fundamentals 1 or Fundamentals 2, you will be able to sign up for our education course that has over 20 hours of educational content brought to you by some of the biggest names in the field: Dr. Brian Mann, Zach Daycant, Jeff Moyer, Terrence Kennel, and many more inside of this course, all for less than the price of one course at a college university. Hawkin Dynamic is the best option if you're trying to get any force plate data or if you're trying to collect any isometric mid-thigh pulls. Not only can you do isometric mid-thigh pulls for the lower body, but I call it an isometric mid-thigh pull for your upper body, where you're able to do an isometric push-up into something where your back is pushing into a bar and your hands are on the force plate. I utilized Hawkins force plates and Hawkins software when I was at Towson. Still utilize it now when I'm at Goldfinch. If you're using the other competitors, I don't know what you're doing. Hawkins customer service is second to none. Hawkins software and their hardware, again, second to none. Check them out in the link down below. Are you or your athletes waking up too hot or too cold in the middle of the night? Or are you looking for a sleep tracker option that doesn't involve wearing a ring or a wrist or a watch, something on your body? Then you need to look no further than the company SleepMe. SleepMe makes chili pads, which keep your bed cold or warm depending on what you want. And they also have a tracker that will go underneath that pad, so it will be able to tell how well you slept. When I did a little study on myself with the Aura Ring and with the SleepMe tracker, they were within 97% of each other, and it was actually pretty astonishing how similar the two were. I love my chili pad. It makes me sleep great. I sleep cold. I actually wake up cold now. I haven't woke up warm. And pretty much ever since I've had it, I don't like sleeping on the road because I don't have the ability to use my chili pad. Bunch of former colleagues back at Towson got it. My stepmother got it. Check it out in the link down below.
We face a lot, right? Because it not only the new Netflix document series, but it's social media every single day. It's like, it's super easy to get caught in that social media matrix of misinformation. And we recognize that for better or for worse, an athlete or a parent only needs to see that one time to be convinced that that's the way to go, right? But yet they have to hear it from us, the evidence-based approach, 17,000 times before they're like, oh yeah, you're right. That's probably a good, better way to go. So how do I approach this, right? I approach with empathy and curiosity, right? I don't know if you're a Ted Lasso fan, but my all-time favorite scene is, when Ted and what's his face are throwing darts in the pub, and he goes on
I've
and he's
seen
talking
that
about
scene.
it. He talks about, like approaching it with curiosity, getting curious, asking questions, right? Like, maybe you would want to know, like, if I play darts, right? Like approaching a conversation with a parent or an athlete with that curiosity. Don't assume that you know everything. And because I need to better understand where they're coming from, right? Like, maybe they have some sort of family history or lived experience that makes them super passionate about believing the thing that I wouldn't normally suggest, that they got from social media or Netflix or whatever it may be. I need to understand where they're coming from before I can try to debunk that chaos.
It's a really good point.
Yeah. So we have a conversation, and the hard part, right, is that no one has more than 3 minutes to have a conversation, right? Like
Nobody has more than 90 seconds.
That's true. Yeah. In some cases, all they want is validation. That, like, yeah, it's okay to think that this is true when you know that it is not, and that it could be potentially harmful. And so the best thing that I can do is ask them to get curious, and again, try to meet them halfway and encourage them to to pay attention, right, to what's changing with their performance, recovery, and injury prevention. I'm going to take a perfect example. All right, I've got an athlete right now that started exploring with the carnivore approach. This is a middle distance male high school athlete that started exploring with the carnivore approach. after his cross country season last fall. And, ironically, started not feeling very good. Right. And also, I mean, unfortunately, it became feeling like a little bit more down, depressed, a little bit more anxious. But no one got curious about it until track season when, again, his performances were just not good. Like training was fine, but like once he needed to ratchet it up and take it to that like high performance level, he just didn't have any gas in the tank. And so we had to start like unpacking that a little bit. Like, okay, when did this start? Like when did you start exploring this and like providing the evidence base approach, right? Well, carbohydrates are important for serotonin production, and if you don't have digested carbohydrate, aka glucose, you don't have the energy resource that you're looking for when you are trying to go at that high intensity. And so it's tough, right? Because now we're trying to unpack like 6 months of believing in a system that probably was not optimal for him. And it's hard because you don't want to be a jerk. You don't want to be like, well, that was dumb.
Even though you want to say that.
But you want to say that, right? But you gotta approach it with empathy, because again, what is that lived experience? What made them come to that in the first place? Because if you can't get to the root, the weed's going to keep growing.
Ooh. Amen to that. And I mean, but like you said, you're now having to, when you're educating them, you're having to, like, they're going to now have to admit that they were wrong. And then, so you're right, you do have to approach it with empathy. But that's why, to me, and I'm sure you have the same mission, is like, if it's just being inundated with like, oh, supplements, you have gene mutation, get a blood test, food sensitivity, like all of these things, even though the reliability of the tests are nil, and that,
Mm-hmm.
like,
Mm-hmm.
you have to just keep fighting that good fight and putting that information out there, so that way they can come around. And you're not gonna get anybody by being like, see, I told you so. Like, no, you need to help the
Right.
next person and the next person.
Right. Yep. You got to stay humble, because, as soon, yeah, life will humble you real quick if you get too cocky about it. We often say at the Performance Collective that you know everyone's looking for the next sexiest thing, right? Like, and it's the lab tests, it's it's all the stuff that you just said, that it's like, okay, well, maybe it has its time and place in some situations, but we gotta we gotta do the mundane stuff first, and no one wants to do the mundane stuff. And
No.
so I flipped the script, and I was like, you know what, food is sexy because no one's doing it right. Like, if we're not doing it right yet, then that makes it sexy. So let's do that. Let's make food sexy, and like figure that out first and then move on, right? Because we've got to get back to basics.
That's a really good way to flip it on its head and to put the low hanging fruit back at that low hanging fruit, because people are climbing over that to get to the very, very top of like,
Yep.
okay, I got to do X, Y, and Z. But if you actually just say, like, no, hey, this is sexy, this is cool to do. Hey, have breakfast, have your snacks, have your, I call it the rainbow diet, where I want you to eat all, like, and I tell my personal training clients this. Hey, I want you to eat all the colors of the rainbow in terms of fruit and veggies, because it's
Mm-hmm.
the different phytochemicals that you need from all of them. Like, people are overlooking probably the most is your whites, whether it's actually getting cauliflower, onions, garlic, and then trying to actually understand that, and then getting your purples and just eating all the different colors of it. Like, that's been something where it's like, let me brand it for you that way, like, oh, you're eating the rainbow diet, so you see. But it's like, no, I just want you to eat fruit and vegetables, for the love of
Right.
God. And I want you to
Right.
stop saying that you're not eating carbs, because there are carbohydrates in fruit and vegetables. Like,
Yes.
please,
Thank
please.
you. Thank you. Yes. And I mean, that's a conversation I have on the regular. It's like, okay, so you're not eating carbs. Okay, well, what are you eating? And then, there's obviously carbohydrates in their fueling plan, which is like greatly celebrated. But then you have to take that opportunity to kind of like educate in a polite way, like, okay, well, okay, I hear some carbohydrate in there. That's good, and because we need that for any sort of moderate to high intensity work, like that's going to be your best friend. um and then so what I find is like, it doesn't take um, there's not a lot of pushback there, but like it's helpful to provide that education and like awareness of, oh, okay, that makes sense.
Has that light bulb gone off for you? Because I want our listeners to kind of hear that too, because it has eventually for me, where it's like I used to get really mad about it, but it's like, look, without the miseducation, we wouldn't have the ability to have a job to
Yes.
educate people, to be able to
Yep.
help them understand, the things that they can do. So instead of, okay, maybe initially you get frustrated because all well and purpose, like, no, I want you to live a good life. That's why
Hmm.
I'm frustrated. Like,
Hmm.
okay, hey, you're not, let's help you, and this is the path. Has that been kind of the mindset for you in your career?
Yeah, absolutely. It was probably, you asked kind of about that light bulb moment. It was, somewhere in the last, 5 to 6 years where, um, I started to say to my athletes, like, ask the question. Ask the question because I learn as much from you as
Mm.
you learn from me. Because without those questions, I don't know what you're struggling with, right? Like, especially at the high school level. And again, I work a lot with high school athletes. I fully recognize this. I've been doing this a long time, right? So like, and I feel like I say some of the same stuff on a regular basis. So I assume that everyone who I'm talking about we're all on the same page, right? Like we have like that baseline knowledge, but I am humbled when I have, an athlete raise their hand and ask something, well, is there carbohydrate in, deli meat or, something that you would be just like, duh, no, like, but it's like, no, thank you. I cannot explain how much I appreciate that question, because if you thought it, there are probably 10 of your buddies who thought the same thing, like, and we need to allow that space for those questions. Otherwise, we're just going to get blown off because we're going to be speaking at a level that's way over their heads, and then we no one wins, right? No one makes progress. And so no, I truly believe that, yeah, keep with the curiosity because it helps all of us.
Well, I mean, now you're not only, coaching sport coaches and athletes and parents, but you talk about the performance collective. You have this event. You're educating more and more coaches. Kind of as we land the plane and wrap this episode up, like exactly the performance collective. What is it? The event that you have going on? Let's talk about that.
Yeah, awesome. So this has been a work in progress, right? This has been an idea that's been floating around in my head for quite some time, and I'm so excited to finally bring it to real life. So June 13th, we are hosting Energize, Empower, Excel, a workshop for sport professionals to enhance their competence in fueling the adolescent athlete. So this workshop is for coaches, athletic directors, athletic trainers, strength coaches, mental health therapists, registered dietitians, anyone who supports adolescent athletics in any way, shape, or form. And we are, we're talking about how to detect disordered eating disorders in sport, how that presents in real life, because there is a lot of this happening. About 45% of adolescent athletes will experience disordered eating behaviors throughout their high school athletic careers, and about 13.5% will experience a diagnosed eating disorder. And that's a lot. When you compare the numbers, there's actually a higher incidence of eating disorders than there are concussions. And that is shocking, right? Like when I saw that, I was like, no way, that can't be right. But, again, depending on how you look at the numbers, it is happening, and I get it, right? Like no one wants to talk about this because it feels heavy and it feels overwhelming, it feels complicated, and no one feels like they have the answers. Again, you don't have to have the answers on your own. It truly takes a team approach. And so what we're doing is we have a rock star lineup of presenters. We've got a sports physician. The Iowa women's basketball sports physician is going to come and talk about her expertise in REDS and eating disorders. and adolescent athletics. And we've got a licensed mental health counselor who specializes in eating disorders and athletes. We've got a certified eating disorder specialist, registered dietitian. We've got a physical therapist with a specialty in bone health, where she's going to talk about long-term implications of eating disorders in bone health and some emerging research in ACL. Damage, reconstruction, and low energy availability. We've got an athletic trainer, and then who's going to talk about, how do all these worlds intersect, right? Because the athletic trainers truly are the hub, the center, right? Because they've got access all the time. And then I, as a sports dietitian, of course, an applied sports dietitian working with high school and college athletes, having seen a lot of eating disorders, disordered eating, REDS, then I'll speak as well. So we're going to spend the morning talking about, like, okay, what it is, what to look for, how this presents in real life, how to participate as part of an interdisciplinary team. And then the afternoon is going to be spent talking about, okay, what do we do about it, right? Like, because, and I'm super passionate about this part of the day, because I feel like there's a lot of conferences or workshops that I go to that, you learn so much and you're like, wow, this is awesome. What the hell do I do with this information, right? Like, how do I actually apply this? And so we're going to be talking about, that approach that we've taken with the Performance Collective, and how we've been able to support organizations, high school athletic departments, to promote a positive food culture, right? Like, I'm not going into these high schools and talking about, like, how do we prevent eating disorders? I'm not talking about anorexia and bulimia and orthorexia, right? Because no one wants to talk about that. And I don't blame them. But what we are doing is we are going in, we are educating, we're improving the knowledge base about why food and adequate energy intake is important, right? And so we're going to talk about what that looks like, and then how our participants can take this information and apply it in their own environments, right? Like, who are the resources in your area? Who can you tap into? And if you got nobody, we've got a list for you. Like, we've got an entire referral Rolodex of professionals across the state that are well versed in this and provide some support.
You talked about nutrition and its importance with, or exercise with mental health, but like nutrition and mental illnesses, like how prevalent is that too? Like, you talked about the issue with the runner with the carnivore diet, but I mean, there's tons of research out there on, what you put into your body, like healing the gut and healing the brain.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, you think about our brain, it's an organ, it's a muscle, right?
Yeah.
It requires energy in order to function. And if it doesn't have the energy, aka the calories, right? We're talking about the same thing, it doesn't function optimally. And then we consider it a, quote, brain injury, right? Like, there is a metabolic injury that is experienced, and that's how we talk about REDS, and how REDS can sometimes lead to diagnosed eating disorder. Eating disorders are a diagnosed mental health condition, right? And they are directly related to inadequate energy intake. And it's a very multifaceted kind of concept, but they're very, very closely related. So, I mean, when speaking to specific nutrients, though, that impact mental health, I'm referring to it now as brain health, right? Because when we think about the brain, needing that energy, like, I think it kind of hits a little bit harder and makes it a little bit more like real. But, omega-3 fatty acids, magnesium, B vitamins, adequate carbohydrate, right? All of these things have been shown to directly impact mental health, brain health.
There it is, folks. You can't. I said it. I learned it at Harvard. You can't outwork a bad diet. And one of my personal training clients, he's my MMA coach when I was living in Maryland. He's like, "What if I just want to work with my bad diet?" He's like, "Can I keep eating Taco Bell?" Like, no, bro, you can't.
Eat what you want, add what you need. You're probably going to need some color with that Taco Bell, and probably some higher quality proteins and some hydration, some fluid. But yeah, it's so true. You can't expect highest performance on or off the competition field without fueling yourself with some energy dense, nutrient dense options.
Ellen, we thank you very much for coming on the show. We're going to link all of your stuff down below, and I'm going to be at the event, so look forward to seeing you there. Anybody else in the Iowa area, make sure you're heading to the Performance Collective. That's a Thursday, June 13th.
Absolutely.
Have a
Thanks so
great
much
rest
for
of your
having
day.
me.
Yeah, you're
Thanks, you
welcome.
too.
Congratulations on making it to the end of the video. Why don't you celebrate by watching more videos just like it? You can also help us on our quest to placate the algorithm gods by liking, sharing, subscribing, and commenting. Thank you.